Welcome. In this class on elections, let's understand first of all why there is a need for election. Consider that you go to school on a daily basis. Now, once you enter the school premise, you see all chaos, the things are all mismanaged. Would you like to enter such a school campus? Definitely no. So, what would be your choice? Your choice, first of all, would be a school campus where the things are managed orderly, and therefore, what is required is a sound management. Now, where does the sound management comes from? There can be two ways. Either this management could be nominated or it could be elected. Now, understanding the difference between the two terms, nominated versus elected. Nominated means the principal of the school says that okay, these 5 people would be looking after the management, so that's nominated. But a major drawback with nominated is that probably there could be personal preferences, there could be biasness, there could be certain segment of society which is not represented. So to avoid all this, what is done is elections. Now the same way, if the management of a school premise is elected probably by the students or the other faculties, that would have a better say about the management and the quality of the management. The same works with a nation as well. So for a nation, what we require is elections, and therefore we understand why elections are important. Another important thing to understand about election is when we talk about a country like India, which is so vast, it's important that the things which are said by each and every individual won't go to the center and would not be considered for amendments in the constitution. But yes, on behalf of the common people, there could be someone who can have their words taken to the parliament. Now this happens, and this is called as representative democracy. So in India, we say we have a representative democracy. That means the people elect certain representative. Now the number of the representatives are relatively small in contrast to the large area that we cater to. But each of these representatives, which are smaller in number, would bring in the problems of the common man from the region and therefore represent that problem at the national level or at the state level. So either at the state legislature or at the central legislature, the problems could be brought forward, and therefore elections become an important criteria. Now, who are eligible to vote to the people who are contesting in the election? So there are two things that we need to understand. So one side is the common man, the other side is the people who are contesting the elections, and they are known as contestants. So now these common people would have to vote for, let's say, A, B, C and D contestants who are contesting the election. Now they would give their preference. Okay, person A1 wants to give vote to A, person 2 wants to give votes to B, and so on and so forth. Now this whole thing is decided under the constitution by which article? This is decided by article 326. Article 326 of the Constitution, extremely important, says that every citizen above the age of 18 years has the right to cast vote irrespective of the caste, religion, gender, etc. And this is the universal adult franchise, which is one of the important aspects of India's constitution. Now, what is election? In simple terms, it is a contest, and this contest occurs either between two individuals or two different political parties, or some political parties at one end and independent members at another end. But the idea of the election is to provide a framework for modern representative democracy, and the citizens elect a leader through the means of free and fair election procedure, which is conducted by Election Commission in India. Now, why are elections important? As I said previously, the issues that are there with the nomination, the drawbacks of nomination are automatically the reasons why we need the election. So one is to understand that there are no biasness. The second important thing is, when there is a large area, as I said, to check, and with very few people who are actually working or supervising for it. We call this process as a representative democracy. That means the common people would elect few people, and those people would be responsible for the vast area and the development and the related programs and policies for that. Another important reason for elections is to identify if any political party is getting overpowered or is unpopular, is practicing unhealthy means towards the people. In those cases, that political party needs to be ruled off, and therefore new political party would get into power. And this is why elections are important, to ensure that dictatorship does not prevail. The next important is, in case we consider the present leaders are not doing their due diligence, they are not working properly, then the common people would say that yes, the government right now who is in power is not doing good, so we definitely need a new government. And therefore there is always this ringing bell, and this makes the current party do its best when they are in power. Also, another important thing for elections is, in the case of India specifically, when we talk about multi-party system, we have various political parties. The idea is each political party have their own ideologies, have their own policies, and then the common people try to understand the different ideologies, the different policies, and whether they agree with those or disagree with those, based on which they would cast their votes. And this election also provide a platform to develop awareness, participation and political education for a common people. Now, the process of election can be of two types: direct election and indirect election. Direct election means I cast the vote directly to the person I want to be in power. The good example is casting votes for MLAs, that is Member of Legislative Assemblies, MPs, Member of Parliament. So when you have a Lok Sabha election, what happens is you cast the vote directly for the person you want from your constituency. Constituency means your area. Okay, so that is what is a direct election. So voters directly elect the representative. Now, what is indirect election? Indirect election occurs in the case of president, vice president, members of Rajya Sabha. So the president is not directly elected. So we elect the MPs, the MLAs, and they cast their vote for the election for the president. That means it is a two-step procedure and it is not a direct election. We call this as indirect election. Now, another important difference is, in a direct election, large number of voters are there. However, in an indirect election, let's say for election for the president, it would be occurring only in the parliament. So a small number of them would have to vote. A small number of people would be voting, and all the people who would be voting would be at par. However, under direct election, there is a age which is defined. The eligibilities for the contestants are defined, and therefore there is law which defines each and everything. Another important things. Now, let's talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of both the direct election and the indirect election. Now, direct election, since it is directly casting, we are directly casting the vote for the members of the Legislative Assembly or the Parliament. It is more democratic, more responsible, it reduces the level of corruption, and definitely if common people are casting their vote, that means their interests are clearly reflected, that which party do they want as a ruling party. However, this direct election does have some drawbacks. For example, if the people who are giving their votes are ignorant, illiterate, in that case, the power might go to the incorrect hand. Sometimes the political parties force the people with false promises, and therefore people get swayed away with those false promises, resulting in incorrect results. So those are some important drawbacks with direct election. Coming on to indirect election. The most important benefit of indirect election is it is a two-stage process. So we elect some people and they elect another set of people. So there is two stages, and since there are two stages, if there is a mistake in one stage, it could be rectified at another stage, and the two stages are at a distance, they are not very close together. So if there is something which goes as an aggressive feeling, that could be cooled down because of the time gap that is provided. And also, since indirect elections are indirect, one of the major benefits is it is free of all the complexities that occur because of the popularity of some figure. So that popularity of a figure gives its reflection in a direct election, not in an indirect election. Indirect elections do have some disadvantages. One is, as I mentioned, it would kill the popular interest. It is again a disadvantage because definitely a popular figure could be a good figure for the country. The next is, sometimes it also breeds corruption because it's not a opinion of a huge lot of people ultimately, so it can lead to corruption. This also increases the formal procedure because it's a two-stage process which involves a lot of expenditure in itself, and sometimes it can also be anti-democratic because it keeps the voter and the representative at distance. So those are some of the drawbacks of an indirect election. Coming next is three important terms: general election, by-election and midterm election. General elections in the case of India are the elections that occur every 5 years for the election. So they are the elections which are conducted at regular interval. So it could be for the members of state legislative assemblies, it could be for members of parliament at the state level or at the central level, but they occur every 5 years. They are called as general elections. The central general election, which is for the Lok Sabha, would be held in 2024 this time. The next is midterm election. Now, midterm election is an election when, let's say, the assembly dissolves before a period of 5 years. There could be n number of reasons for it. For example, it's not a one-party ruling that was seen, and it was a coalition government. Coalition means 2 or 3 parties come together and form a government at the center. Now, if 2 or 3 parties come together and after 1 year, let's say one of the party withdraws. Now, if one party withdraws, then the total support would decrease, and as a result, the assembly would have to dissolve. Now, if this occurs before a period of 5 years, a fresh general elections would take place, and this is called as a midterm election because it is not in the set duration of 5 years. It is before the completion of the 5 years. The next is by-election. Now, by-election would occur only if a vacancy is created. This vacancy is created usually under 2 circumstances. One is by the resignation of the member. The second is by the untimely death of the member of the parliament or the legislative assembly. Now, in these 2 circumstances, a vacancy is created and this vacancy has to be filled, but the new person who would be appointed would be there only for the remaining term, and this process is known as by-election. Coming on to another important term when we talk about elections is constituency. Constituency is a demarked area or a represented area within the country, within the state, and this has fixed boundaries. I give you a very simple example. For example, in the region of Kashmir, Ladakh has been separated. Now, since Leh Ladakh has been separated, the constituent boundaries have been redefined. Now, these constituencies, since have been redefined, the fixed areas have been chalked out, and these fixed areas are the areas where the members living in those areas would be casting their vote. Now, these constituencies could be of 3 types: single member, multi-member and reserved constituencies. In India, we do have a single member constituency. That means from each constituency, one person would represent that constituency, and he or she would be the winner and would represent that constituency. We call this as a single member constituency. Multi-member, where more than one representatives are there, but in India, we do not have multi-member constituencies. In India, we do have a reserved constituency. Reserved constituency means, let's say, an area which is highly densely populated by scheduled tribes or scheduled caste. In that case, to protect their rights, there is a provision that only a person would be elected who belongs to the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribe. Other members cannot even contest for that seat or that constituency. Now this is called as a reserved constituency. Why it is important? The major reason is to provide a equitable representation to the weaker section or the weaker community, and to ensure that the powerful and the influential or the resourceful communities are not represented unduly. So in order to ensure that, reserved constituencies have been proposed, and those are in existence in India. Now all this work is taken care by whom? Taken care by the Election Commission. So the role of the Election Commission is to ensure free and fair. The two terms are extremely important: free and fair general elections in the country. And Article 324, Article 326 talks about a universal adult franchise where 18 plus are eligible to cast their vote. Article 324 talks about the powers of superintendence, direction, control of election to the Parliament, State Legislature, President, Vice President of India. That means all these elections would be conducted with due rules and regulations, and if required, this election commission would so in the election commission, how is the framework? There is one chief election commissioner, we call them as CEC, and then there are two other one and one, so one and one, so two other election commissioners. Now the chief election commissioner is there for a tenure of 6 years, not 5 years, important to note, or 65 years of age, whichever is attained earlier. So if a person becomes 65 years of age earlier and has not completed the 6 years of tenure, then the person would be superseded by the next chief election commissioner. The two other election commissioners are also appointed by the president along with the chief election commissioner. All appointments are made after the approval by the prime minister. So all the appointments are made by the president, but only after approval by the prime minister. Another important thing is, if required during the time of election commissioners could be assisted by regional commissioners, and the local staff, the state staff, they can help them. Now, how is the chief election commissioner removed? The process of removal of the chief election commissioner is the same as the judge of Supreme Court. That means the chief election commissioner can be removed by the process of impeachment. And for other election commissioners, if they are to be removed, they would be removed by the president on recommendation of the chief election commissioner. The conditions for the service of the chief election commissioner will not be varied to his disadvantage after his appointment. Another important thing is, the election commission would have the complete control over the staff on duty during the time of election. Now this election commission has certain functions. The very important function is to control the election, to direct the election, superintend the election, and even conduct the election for the president, vice president, for center, for state legislature, lay down the guidelines for the election, determine which areas would have been considered in one constituency, that is delimitation as it is called as. So we call it as delimitation of the constituencies, and then electoral rules are prepared. The symbols for the political parties are allotted. Let's say I want to contest as an independent candidate, then there are a list of free symbols. I have to pick a symbol from the given list of free symbols and choose that as my symbol for the election that I want to contest. And then it also recognizes the political party. Now, what is the criteria in India to become a national political party and a state political party? We have covered in a separate lecture. The criteria varies from state to state, country to country, and the criteria for India and even Nepal are different. So we have covered that in 2 separate lectures. If you want to go into detail, you can refer that. The idea is also to settle any dispute if it arises while there is an election process going on, and due to some unforeseen circumstances, if there is a requirement to postpone an election or countermand an election, that decision would be taken by the election commissioner. So election commission is a relatively independent body, which is away from any political pressure of the existing ruling political party. Its idea is to prepare the electoral roll, which includes the list of voters, all the eligible person who would be giving the vote. So it would include their name, father's name, age, sex, and then everyone would have the equal opportunity to vote, and each vote would have the equal value. That means, be it the vote from a upper caste, a lower caste, from a male or a female member of the society, all of them would have a equal proportion when it comes to finalizing the results. The election dates are fixed by the Election Commission in case there is a request for the elections to be held on certain dates, and that cannot be done. Election Commission would give a clear reason stating why the elections cannot be conducted on the given dates. Then the nomination papers are scrutinized. Now this is again an interesting process. There are, as of the current modifications, let's say if I want to appear for a political party, I want to contest the election, then I would submit my nomination paper. Now this nomination paper would be scrutinized by the Election Commission. So what would be checked? The assets, the liabilities, if there are any serious criminal charges, what is the educational qualification, and all those things would be made public. It would be visible to everyone across the country, whosoever wants to check it. Allotment of the symbol, as I said, is another important purpose. Checking when the election would be, conducting the election, and declaration of the result. So there is a presiding officer and a polling officer. So polling officer is responsible for the final counting and the whole process that would go after the election as well. And then also to check that the ruling party does not play a major role while the election is going on. When the election is being conducted, what the voter has to bring is a photo identity card, a driving license, a ration card copy, or any other sign of photo identity like Aadhaar would work for a voters list or the eligibility to vote. Now, Election Commission would set up booth. It's not only just setting up the booth. Along with setting up the booth, what is important is appointment of the presiding officer, appointment of the polling officer. And then, what is the procedure of the election? The procedure of the election on the side of the contestant is, I'll file the nomination. When my nomination is being filed, Election Commission would scrutinize whether I am eligible, and if every criteria is met, then I would be published as a list of the candidates who would be contesting the election. Then there is the eligibility for election campaign to be done. Finally, the date of polling where the votes are being casted by the common people, and then counting of the vote and declaration of the result. So what is an election campaign? Election campaign is organized for a period of 2 weeks between the time of announcement of the final list of the contestants who would be contesting the election and the final date of polling. Now, during this time, the candidate can connect with the voters. They can have meetings, gatherings, they can mobilize support of the common people and gather opinion, build mass opinion during that time. Now, there are various campaigns. For example, in 1971, during Indira Gandhi's time, Garibi Hatao or Remove Poverty was one of the major campaign. During 1977, Janata Party set Save Democracy as one of the major election campaigns. But there is one very important thing with whatsoever campaign goes, that no political party can threaten an individual to cast vote for a specific person. So there can be no threatening, there can be no bribery. You cannot bribe a person to vote for a specific party. You cannot appeal for vote in name of religion. So that is again not allowed. You cannot use any government resource for campaigning. That is again not allowed. And you cannot spend more than 70 lakh rupees for Lok Sabha elections, and 23 lakh rupees, 28 lakh rupees for state assembly elections. And that's the cap. That more than that amount could not be spent by the political parties. So this was a mere introduction about the topic on elections. If you have any questions or queries, feel free to post those in the comment section. Thanks for joining in.